Before he became Wolverine, Hugh Jackman was a struggling actor working kids' birthday parties as a clown named Coco, earning about $50 a gig. He's admitted he didn't even know any real magic tricks and was once told by a 6-year-old, "You're terrible." Jackman has said those early performances forced him to learn how to command a room, handle rejection, and keep entertaining no matter what, skills that would later define his stage and film career. In 1946, French designer Louis Réard named the bikini after Bikini Atoll, where the United States had just conducted atomic bomb tests. He chose the name deliberately, claiming the revealing swimsuit would have an explosive cultural impact similar to the atomic blast that had just shocked the world. Sylvester Stallone wrote the script for Rocky in about 3 days after watching underdog boxer Chuck Wepner go the distance with Muhammad Ali. At the time, Stallone was struggling financially and reportedly had less than $200 in his bank account. Studios offered to buy the script but wanted a major star in the lead role. Stallone refused any offers unless he could play Rocky himself. He took a significantly smaller payday to secure the role, a gamble that paid off when Rocky won the Academy Award for Best Picture and launched his career. This is why you should never dump your pet goldfish in the wild. A goldfish weighing 30 kilograms, about 67 pounds, was pulled from a lake in France after growing to an enormous size. Goldfish can reproduce rapidly, creating entire populations of invasive fish that overwhelm local ecosystems. Some lakes have reported thousands of them multiplying beneath the surface, unseen until the damage is already done. Without natural predators and with endless food, they grow to ridiculous sizes, churn up lake beds, rip out vegetation, cloud the water, and slowly suffocate native wildlife. In 2002, Washington State mother Lydia Fairchild nearly lost custody of her own children after DNA tests appeared to prove she wasn't biologically related to them. She had applied for public assistance, and routine genetic testing showed her DNA did not match the children she had given birth to, raising suspicions of fraud. After multiple failed maternity tests, doctors discovered she was an extremely rare human chimera, meaning she had absorbed her twin in the womb and carried 2 distinct sets of DNA in her body. Her reproductive organs contained different genetic material than the rest of her tissues, which is why standard DNA testing falsely suggested she wasn't their mother. In 2024, Toronto Blue Jays fan Liz McGuire was suddenly struck in the face by a 110-mile-per-hour foul ball off of Bo Bichette's bat after briefly looking away during a game, leaving her with ridiculously severe swelling and a black eye that later went viral online. She managed to avoid any major injuries, but another fan grabbed the ball that hit her and ran off. After she publicly asked the team to hook a girl up, the moment gained national attention. Topps produced 110 custom cards featuring her injury photo, and the Blue Jays later sent her a signed Bo Bichette baseball, tickets, and access to batting practice, turning a potentially life-threatening accident into one of baseball's best fan stories. In April of 2016, 11-year-old Chris Gaither of Talladega, Alabama, was home alone when a 30-year-old man broke in, reportedly armed and demanding money. That's when the boy grabbed a handgun and fired multiple rounds as the intruder moved through the house, striking him in the leg and forcing him to flee into nearby woods. Suspect was later captured and charged with burglary, among other offenses. No charges were filed against Gaither, and local authorities publicly stated he acted in self-defense. The case sparked national debate over gun access and child self-defense, while the intruder eventually recovered from his injuries while in custody. In Osaka, Japan, 23-year-old cosplayer Saki Sato was arrested after police say she cut off part of her 21-year-old boyfriend's ring finger with a hatchet and stored it inside the refrigerator. Authorities allege she had previously cut off his left nipple with scissors and exerted extreme control over his finances and phone. The victim himself eventually contacted police, leading officers to discover the preserved finger. Sato denied intentionally mutilating him, claiming he hurt himself, but prosecutors charged her with multiple counts of assault. If convicted, she faces significant prison time under Japan's criminal injury statutes. In August of 2010, dismissed Filipino officer Rolando Mendoza hijacked a tour bus carrying Hong Kong visitors in Manila, demanding his job be reinstated after corruption charges. The standoff dragged on for nearly 11 hours and was broadcast live, with negotiations collapsing after Mendoza's brother, who was trying to mediate, was arrested by authorities. As tensions escalated, Mendoza opened fire on the hostages, while police launched a chaotic rescue attempt that drew heavy criticism for poor coordination. The crisis ended when a police sniper finally killed Mendoza, but 8 tourists were dead and several others injured, sparking sparking diplomatic fallout between Hong Kong and the Philippines. In February of 2025, 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick allegedly shot and killed her parents to death while they slept inside their Georgia home. She initially called 911 and reported finding them dead, and in the months that followed, posted emotional TikTok videos mourning their deaths, even urging true crime creators to cover the case, calling it a really big hit. But 5 months later, investigators charged Sarah with 2 counts of murder, citing physical and digital evidence they said tied her to the killings. She turned herself in and was denied bond, as prosecutors described what they called mountains of evidence, while family members publicly maintained her innocence. In 1999, Japanese woman Namiko Takaba was found murdered inside the apartment she shared with her husband, Satoru. With no arrests and very few leads, the case went cold, but Satoru refused to let it fade. Convinced that future forensic technology would eventually expose the killer, he kept paying rent on the empty apartment for 26 years, preserving the crime scene exactly as it was. Bloodstains, footprints, and untouched evidence remained sealed inside, costing him roughly $145,000 over decades. But finally, in late 2025, advances in DNA analysis finally produced a match from the preserved blood evidence. The suspect was identified as a former high school classmate of Satoru, who allegedly harbored a long-standing grudge after he rejected her romantically. Confronted with the DNA evidence, she confessed after her arrest. This preserved specimen shows a child's trachea and lungs with a single peanut lodged inside the airway. Small, smooth foods like peanuts are among the most common choking hazards in young children because they can slip past the throat and become wedged in the windpipe, immediately blocking airflow to the lungs. In some cases, the obstruction causes instant suffocation, while in others it leads to infection, swelling, or gradual respiratory failure if not removed in time. Foreign body aspiration remains one of the leading causes of accidental death in young children, since something as small as a peanut can turn fatal extremely fast. In 2007, a University of Tampa student was walking back to her dorm after a pirate festival when a man she had just met offered to walk her home. Once inside, he raped her and disappeared. Police quickly collected DNA from the scene, but for 14 years there was no match and the case went cold. That was until 2021 when the suspect Jared Vaughn made a critical mistake. He uploaded his DNA to a genealogy website to research his family tree. Investigators used that database to connect Vaughn directly to the crime scene. Despite facing a potential life sentence, Vaughn ultimately accepted a plea deal in 2022 that only resulted in probation and being registered as a sex offender. In July of 2012, 16-year-old Skylar Neese climbed out of her bedroom window after midnight to meet her 2 closest friends, 16-year-old Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf, believing they were going for a fun late-night drive. But instead, they crossed into a secluded wooded area in Pennsylvania, put on hoodies and gloves they had brought with them, counted to 3, and stabbed her more than 50 times in what prosecutors described as a premeditated attack. Investigators later revealed the motive was disturbingly simple. Schoaf said they didn't like her anymore and didn't want to be friends. For months after her disappearance, both girls publicly mourned her on social media, posting heartfelt tributes while knowing exactly where her body was. The case unraveled when Schoaf finally confessed and led authorities to Skylar's remains. She was sentenced to 30 years to life and was eligible for parole in 2023, but remains incarcerated after being denied release. Sheila Eddy received a life sentence and becomes eligible for parole in 2028. In November of 2021, 66-year-old Spanish teacher Noema Grobert was ambushed during her daily walk in a park in Fairfield, Iowa by 2 of her 16-year-old students. Prosecutors said the teens had studied her routine, waited for her at the park, and brutally attacked her with a baseball bat before hiding her body beneath a pile of railroad ties. One of the suspects later shared details of the killing over Snapchat, messages that ultimately helped investigators build the case. Both teenagers were charged as adults with first-degree murder, and later accepted plea deals that resulted in life sentences with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Perhaps most disturbingly, investigators said the motive was shockingly trivial. One of the students was angry over a bad grade in her Spanish class. In 1998, 14-year-old Josh Phillips was playing baseball outside of his Jacksonville, Florida home when the ball suddenly struck his 8-year-old neighbor Maddie Clifton in the eye. Fearing the reaction of his abusive father, Phillips strangled Maddie inside his house, then dragged her body to his bedroom and hid her beneath his waterbed. For 7 days, as a massive search unfolded across the neighborhood, her body remained concealed just feet away from where family, friends, and volunteers gathered, unaware she was right inside the home the entire time. The crime was discovered after a strong odor led Phillips's mother to check under the bed. He was arrested and later convicted of first-degree murder. He remains incarcerated to this day. During the Vietnam War, U.S. Marine sniper Chuck Mahoney recorded 103 confirmed kills, the most in Marine Corps history. Operating in dense jungle terrain, he was known for precision and patience. And in one documented engagement, he recorded 16 confirmed headshot kills in roughly 30 seconds during an ambush. But unlike many wartime figures, Mawhinney returned home and quietly left the Corps, taking a job with the U.S. Forest Service. For more than 2 decades, he told virtually no one, not even his own wife, about his record or role in Vietnam. His service only became widely known years later, when former comrades and military records brought his history to light. This video shows a dolphin playing with a pufferfish, nudging and rolling it around in the water. When threatened, pufferfish release a powerful tetrodotoxin, deadly in high doses but may produce a mild narcotic effect in small amounts. Researchers believe dolphins sometimes provoke the fish just enough to trigger a small release of the toxin before lingering near the surface in a calm, almost trance-like state, highlighting the high intelligence of these creatures and how this intoxication-seeking behavior appears strikingly similar to humans. This cat seems to know exactly how to get its owner's attention, using the door knocker knowing that it's loud enough for the person inside to hear. For the first time on record, scientists documented a wild orangutan deliberately treating his own injury using a medicinal plant. In 2022, a male orangutan named Rakis was observed with an open facial wound, after which he selected leaves from a plant known for its anti-inflammatory properties, chewed them into a pulp, and carefully applied the juice directly onto the wound. He then pressed the leftover plant matter over the injury, effectively forming a crude bandage. Researchers noted the wound healed perfectly without signs of infection, marking the first confirmed case of a wild non-human animal independently performing a multi-step medical treatment on itself. In October of 2006, 18-year-old Nikki Katsouris died after crashing her father's Porsche 911 Carrera at more than 100 miles per hour on a California freeway. The impact was so catastrophic that her body remained strapped in the driver's seat, but her head was no longer attached. The scene was so graphic that the coroner advised her parents not to identify the body. But in the aftermath, 2 California Highway Patrol employees improperly leaked photographs of the accident that quickly spread across the internet, appearing on forums and shock sites. Strangers later began anonymously emailing the horrific images directly to the grieving Katsouris family. The family later pursued legal action against the California Highway Patrol, and in 2012 the state reached a settlement with them over the unauthorized release of the photos. In 1974, 6-year-old Gary Ray Hose ran away from home to escape alleged abuse from his parents. Police soon returned the boy to his household, but he was never seen again. Years later, his older brothers told investigators that their mother had beaten Gary to death shortly after he was brought back and buried his body somewhere on the family's remote desert property. Despite searches and the disturbing testimony, Gary's remains have never been found, leaving the case unresolved and the exact circumstances of his death unknown. On March 4th, 1994, beloved comedian John Candy died of a heart attack at the young age of 43 while filming for Wagons East in Durango, Mexico. Candy long feared he would suffer the same fate as his father, who had also died of a heart attack at a young age. After years of struggling with weight issues, heavy smoking, and earlier drug use, Candy died in his sleep in the middle of production for the film. His death stunned Hollywood, and he was so beloved that when his body was returned to Los Angeles, police took the extraordinary step of shutting down the notoriously busy 405 freeway so his funeral procession could pass uninterrupted, a tribute typically preserved for presidents and other heads of state. On September 24, 2005, Mark Dixie spent his 35th birthday drinking at a pub in London before walking the streets with a knife. In the early hours of the morning, he followed 18-year-old Sally Bowman as she returned home and stabbed her repeatedly outside her own front door. Her body was discovered just steps from safety. Dixie evaded arrest for 9 months until he was involved in an unrelated pub fight, and his DNA was entered into the national database, where it directly matched evidence from the murder scene. In 2006, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years.
Princess Diana dead.
Oh, she died.
Where's the remote?
Oh my God.
That was the moment a group of friends accidentally recorded the exact second the world learned Princess Diana was dead. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana and Dottie Fayed left the Ritz Hotel in Paris after being followed by paparazzi. Their driver sped through the city, apparently trying to lose them, and lost control inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, slamming directly into a concrete support pillar. The impact killed the driver and Dottie Fayette instantly. Diana was pulled from the wreck alive and rushed to the hospital, where doctors desperately fought for hours to save her. At first, reports said she was only injured, and most people couldn't even fathom the idea that she might actually die. News stations described her condition as serious but stable, and the world waited for updates, not realizing how bad it really was. At 4 a.m., French officials confirmed she had died from massive internal injuries at just 36 years old. The news spread instantly as broadcasts were interrupted, radios were stopped, and millions woke up to headlines announcing the sudden death of the most famous woman on Earth. Within hours, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, covering the gates with flowers and letters. One man in the car did survive the crash, Diana's bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. He was the only person wearing a seatbelt, but still broke just about every bone in his face, lost much of his memory, and later said the trauma haunted him for the rest of his life. Investigators later found that driver Henry Paul was heavily intoxicated and driving at extremely high speed. They also confirmed that Diana was not wearing a seatbelt, and experts believe that if she had been restrained, she likely would have survived. Her death became one of the largest public mourning events in world history, with over 2 billion people watching her funeral and an entire generation remembering exactly where they were when they heard of her passing. After her funeral, Diana was buried on a small island in the middle of a lake on her family's property in England. The grave is surrounded by water and trees and is not accessible to the public. This was the moment a man turned a robbery attempt into an instant retreat. Security footage shows a group of thieves pulling up to rob him while he was pumping gas, but instead of freezing, the man immediately sprayed them with the gas hose, forcing them to flee. Gasoline can be extremely irritating to the eyes and skin, causing intense burning, tearing, blurred vision, and temporary blindness. Being soaked in fuel also creates a serious fire risk, making it incredibly risky for attackers to stay close or continue the assault. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, here's a clip of a tarantula walking on the surface. Some species of tarantulas are able to stand and move across the surface of water, thanks to a combination of their light body weight and the tiny water-repellent hairs that cover their bodies. These hairs trap air and increase surface tension, allowing the spider to distribute its weight without breaking through. When threatened or escaping predators, tarantulas can briefly run across lakes, streams, or flooded ground, giving the illusion that it's literally walking on water before climbing back to safety. That is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. So, where the hell is Savannah Guthrie's mom? Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, was last seen when her family dropped her off at her home in Arizona on the night of January 31st, 2026. By the following morning, she was gone. Concern quickly grew when she failed to show up for church on Sunday morning, something her friends described as highly out of character, prompting them to contact her family. Inside her home, her car, phone, and daily medication were all left behind, a detail investigators described as especially alarming, considering her limited mobility and reliance on those medications. Police stated she had no history of wandering, confusion, or cognitive decline, making it highly unlikely she would have left on her own, especially at night. Despite the apparent urgency of the situation, there were no publicly reported signs of forced entry or a struggle, only deepening the unease surrounding how she disappeared without a trace. Investigators later described the scene inside the home as very concerning, saying they believe she didn't leave voluntarily and that the case should be treated as a potential crime. Authorities have since collected DNA evidence, involved multiple agencies, and are reviewing tips and nearby surveillance footage, but as of now, no suspect or confirmed lead has been announced. Here's an extremely rare encounter with the Tibetan fox, an animal most people don't even know exists. The Tibetan fox is one of the least documented wild canids in the world, native to the high-altitude Tibetan Plateau, where it survives above 12,000 feet in extreme cold and isolation. The fox is instantly recognizable by its unusually square-shaped head, narrow eyes, and thick fur, giving it the appearance of a fox you drew in third-grade art class. Solitary and highly specialized, it relies heavily on plateau pikas for food, tying its survival to a very narrow ecosystem, which makes genuine close-up encounters in the wild highly uncommon. Here's some incredible footage of the oldest person ever captured on film. This is Pope Leo XIII, born in 1810, appearing in an 1898 motion picture at the age of 88. By the time this was filmed, Leo XIII had already been alive for nearly 9 decades. He was born when many people who had fought in the American Revolution were still alive, lived through the reigns of multiple emperors and kings, was already an elderly man during Abraham Lincoln's presidency, and is even older than your mom. Researchers off the coast of Tenerife have captured extremely rare footage of a black sea devil. a deep-sea anglerfish that usually lives thousands of feet below the surface, swimming in unusually shallow water. The black sea devil is almost never seen alive in daylight, and scientists say this may be the first ever recorded video of the species swimming near the surface. Its sudden emergence has left researchers completely baffled, since deep-sea anglerfish usually only rise from the depths when they're sick, dying, or pushed upward by shifting ocean conditions. Here's a rare view of the insane intricacies of a computer chip. What you're looking at is a maze of microscopic pathways where billions of transistors switch on and off to process every command a device makes. The structures are engineered at a scale smaller than wavelengths of visible light, pushing the limits of modern manufacturing. Because of how abstract it looks at this level, it's often cited as an example of alien technology. That was a digital recreation of images, since a standard optical microscope can't resolve details that small. In order to actually see structures at that level in video format, you would need an extremely high-powered electron microscope. Brett Favre built his reputation on never leaving the field, even when his brain was clearly injured. Over 2 decades, he absorbed countless hits, and later admitted he may have suffered thousands of concussions that were never diagnosed. He said there are entire games he doesn't even remember playing, including big wins and touchdown passes made when he was confused, dizzy, and disoriented. At the time, returning to play after a head injury was often praised as toughness rather than treated as a medical emergency. Favre described playing through ringing ears, flashing lights, and mental fog, classic concussion symptoms that were ignored during an era with virtually no concussion protocols. Painkillers masked the damage, allowing him to stay on the field while repeated hits accumulated. In retirement in 2024, Favre revealed he now has Parkinson's disease, a condition researchers link to long-term head trauma. His famous Iron Man streak of 297 consecutive games is now viewed by neurologists as a warning, showing how endurance in football can come at the cost of permanent brain damage. This video captures the moment a brown bear emerges from its den after nearly 7 months of hibernation, stepping out pale, scruffy, and visibly disoriented after surviving an entire winter without eating, drinking, or going to the bathroom. During hibernation, a bear's heart rate drops dramatically, its body lives off of stored fat, and its muscles barely weaken despite months of total inactivity. When they finally wake up, they can lose up to 40% of their body weight and often look confused and unstable as their organs slowly restart, making this first walk one of its most vulnerable moments of the year. Here's some extremely rare footage of a deep-sea crowned jellyfish filmed by a drone nearly a mile deep underwater, an animal so seldom seen that most records come from a small handful of deep-sea ROV encounters. With its long pointed tentacles and crown-like shape, it looks more like an alien or deep-sea monster than an animal, drifting through complete darkness under immense pressure. Clear footage of such fragile creatures at this depth is considered highly scientifically valuable because they're so rarely seen alive in their natural environment. This was the moment a couple of drunk fishermen spotted a floating whale carcass and thought it would be a good idea to climb on top of it. What they didn't realize is that they were sitting on skin that was already soft and tearing apart, meaning they easily could have fallen straight through and into the whale's guts. Once inside, the collapsing flesh and toxic acids could trap them, suffocate them, or crush them before anyone could help. Additionally, a dead whale is basically a massive rotting pressure tank. As the body decomposes, bacteria inside release huge amounts of methane and other gases that stretch the skin like a balloon. Even a small shift in weight or a tiny puncture can make the entire thing rupture. And this isn't just disturbing or gross, but can even be deadly. In 2013, a dead sperm whale in the Faroe Islands exploded after someone cut into it, killing a man who was standing nearby. In Taiwan in 2004, a whale carcass detonated while being transported through a city, injuring dozens and covering streets in blood and organs. And in Oregon in 1970, officials tried to blow up a beached whale with dynamite, launching massive chunks of blubber hundreds of feet, destroying several cars and nearly killing spectators. In August of 2023, 73-year-old Roger Leadbeater was taking his usual evening walk with his rescue dog Max through a quiet park in Sheffield when he was suddenly hunted and murdered in one of the most savage random attacks in UK history. Security footage later showed 32-year-old Emma Boroway, a schizophrenic patient who had escaped from a psychiatric unit 2 days earlier, pacing around the park and hiding in the bushes before ambushing him. She stabbed Roger more than 50 times, including through the eye and repeatedly in the back as he tried to crawl away, inflicting a total total of 124 separate injuries. His hands, arms, and legs were covered in defensive wounds, showing he fought desperately until he collapsed and died on the ground. When his family returned days later to leave flowers in the spot he died, they found the scene still covered in his blood, with the outline of his body visible and dog prints stamped around it. Emma later told police the devil had tricked her and called the killing a ritual sacrifice. She had previously killed animals, threatened staff, and repeatedly escaped custody. 4 months after being charged with Roger's murder, she took her own life in prison, while an inquest ruled his death was caused by catastrophic failures in mental health supervision. Here's a disturbing video of a man performing a religious milk offering ritual in the Ganges River in India, while nearby homeless and malnourished children rush in and try to catch it to drink. The ritual, meant to symbolize devotion and abundance, turns into a heartbreaking scene of desperation, as children who clearly have nothing to eat are forced to watch food being poured away, a moment that captures the extreme poverty surrounding one of the holiest rivers in the world. In 2012, archaeologists digging beneath a parking lot in Leicester, England, uncovered a human skeleton buried beneath several feet of asphalt. DNA testing later confirmed the remains belonged to King Richard III, the English king who was killed in battle in 1485 and had been missing for more than 500 years. One of the key clues was the severe curvature of the spine found in the skeleton, matching historical accounts that Richard had scoliosis and an uneven shoulder. The discovery solved one of England's oldest royal mysteries and revealed that a medieval king had been buried beneath what later became a modern car park. This is why you should never let anyone kiss your baby, or just don't kiss someone else's baby. A 2-year-old boy from England recently lost vision in his left eye after someone with an active cold sore kissed him, transferring the herpes simplex virus directly into his eye. The infection caused a blister to form on his cornea that quickly turned into a 4mm wide open wound, leading to repeated infections and permanent nerve damage. Doctors said the virus destroyed the feeling in that eye, and the brain eventually stopped sending signals to it, leaving him completely blind on that side. His parents tested negative for herpes, so doctors believe an acquaintance unknowingly passed the virus through a kiss. Despite weeks of treatment, the damage was irreversible, and doctors were later forced to sew his eyelid shut to protect what remained of that eye. In June of 2004, an 8-year-old girl slipped into the active pool at the Fort Worth Water Gardens, a fountain system powered by strong underground pumps that created a hidden undertow. When her father and 2 brothers jumped in to save her, they were immediately dragged under by the suction and drowned. A 4th bystander who tried to help was also pulled in and killed. None of them realized the pool contained currents strong enough to trap adults underwater, and by the time the pumps were shut off, all 4 rescuers were already dead. In Tewkesbury, England, 56-year-old Amanda Nixon, a mother of 10, was found guilty of essentially holding a female slave captive in her home for 25 years, exploiting her as a forced domestic servant under harrowing conditions. Wixon brought the victim into her household in the mid-1990s when she was a teenager with learning difficulties, and over the next quarter century kept her locked inside, regularly physically abusing her, strangling her, hitting her with a broom handle hard enough to knock her teeth out, squirting detergent down her throat, splashing bleach on her face, and forcibly shaving her head. Prosecutors told the court that Wixon deprived her of food, basic hygiene, medical and dental care, and any freedom to leave, even collecting state benefits paid on the victim's behalf while the victim lived in squalor. Wixon denied all the charges, blamed her son for the situation, and showed no remorse, dismissing the convictions as rubbish and refusing to express regret, as jurors convicted her of false imprisonment, forced labor, and assault after hearing evidence of the decades of cruelty. Vern Troyer lived with a rare genetic condition called cartilage hair hypoplasia, which left him just 2 feet 8 inches tall and caused lifelong medical complications. Despite worldwide fame as Mini-Me, he struggled for years with severe depression and alcohol dependency, leading to repeated hospitalizations and psychiatric interventions. In April of 2018, Troyer was hospitalized following a serious health crisis related to alcohol and died shortly after at the age of 48. Authorities later confirmed his passing was intentional, highlighting the long-term toll of his mental health struggles behind the scenes of his public success. In 2022, a 19-year-old woman in Brazil gave birth to twins who were later confirmed by DNA testing to have different fathers. The rare biological phenomenon behind this is called heteropaternal superfecundation, which occurs when 2 eggs released during the same ovulation cycle are fertilized by sperm from different men within a short window of time. Although the twins develop together in the womb and are born at the same time, they're genetically half-siblings. Fewer than a few dozen confirmed cases have been documented worldwide, making it one of the rarest known anomalies in human reproduction. Here's a photo of a young American soldier who would become the face of one of the darkest scandals of the Iraq War. Sabrina Harmon was a 26-year-old U.S. Army reservist stationed at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq in 2003, where she became involved in a massive abuse scandal after photographs surfaced showing prisoners being humiliated, tortured, and posed like trophies. In the most infamous image, Harmon is seen smiling and giving a thumbs up while standing next to the dead body of an Iraqi detainee named Manadel al-Jamadi, who had died in agony during a CIA interrogation after being suspended from the ceiling by his wrists. Other photos of her showed naked prisoners stacked in pyramids, forced to simulate sex acts, threatened with dogs, and terrorized while hooded and restrained. Many of the prisoners photographed were never charged with any crime. Some were held solely because they were picked up during raids or turned in by rivals for bounties. Harmon later admitted she took dozens of photos and wrote home that the abuse was a joke and that watching prisoners suffer and die was, quote, pretty funny. She was convicted in 2005 of conspiracy, dereliction of duty, and maltreatment, and sentenced to 6 months in military prison, a dishonorable discharge, and loss of rank. The images shocked the world and became some of the most infamous symbols of U.S. war crimes in Iraq. The scourged back is an 1863 photograph of an escaped enslaved man named Peter, also known as Gordon, taken after he reached a Union Army camp during the American Civil War. The image shows his back covered in thick keloid scars caused by repeated brutal whippings while enslaved on a Louisiana plantation. The scars were the result of agonizing abuse severe enough to permanently disfigure his skin. When the photograph was published and widely circulated in northern newspapers, it provided undeniable visual proof of the physical cruelty of slavery and became one of the most powerful abolitionist images of the 19th century. Brazilian girl Helena Valera was kidnapped as a child in the 1930s by members of the Yanomami, an isolated indigenous group living deep in the Amazon rainforest. She spent more than 20 years living among them, where she endured repeated violence, forced marriages, sexual abuse, and the killing of her children during tribal conflicts. After escaping back to Western society in 1956, she struggled to reintegrate and was treated as an outsider, never fully belonging to either world. Haunted by trauma, yet emotionally tied to the only life she truly knew, Valero eventually chose to return to live with indigenous tribes in the Amazon, remaining there until her death in 2003, a rare and unsettling case of someone voluntarily returning to a society that once abducted them. This is the face of 87-year-old World War II veteran and daylily horticulturist Leo Sharp, who was pulled over in Michigan in 2011 after appearing confused and disoriented. A search of his vehicle uncovered more than 400 pounds of cocaine, revealing that he'd secretly spent years working as a high-level courier for Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. Because he looked so harmless and was rarely questioned, Sharp transported massive quantities of cocaine across the U.S. before being caught. He later pleaded guilty to drug trafficking charges and was sentenced to prison in his late 80s, becoming one of the oldest cartel mules ever prosecuted. In 1951, the French town of Pont-Saint-Esprit was hit by a sudden outbreak of severe illness after residents ate bread from a local bakery. Around 250 people experienced intense hallucinations, convulsions, and severe paranoia, with some reporting visions of snakes crawling out of their bodies or being consumed by flames. Several victims jumped from windows or ran screaming through the streets, while others were restrained or sedated as hospitals quickly filled beyond capacity. At least 5 people died and dozens were committed to psychiatric institutions. Investigators later concluded the outbreak was most likely caused by ergot poisoning, a toxic fungus that can contaminate rye and produce effects similar to LSD, which many historians have also theorized may have contributed to the Salem witch trials. In 2024, Detroit man Curtis Dixon helped a man he believed was blind and even tried to give him money despite being broke. The encounter was secretly filmed as part of a social media video by Zachary Dereniowski, whose content involves pretending to be vulnerable to test strangers' kindness. Curtis was given $1,000 and the video went viral, portraying him as exceptionally compassionate, and he was given $100,000 more in a follow-up video. But within a few weeks of the videos gaining traction, Dixon was targeted because of the attention and cash he had received. He was lured outside under the pretense of helping a woman with her broken-down car, ambushed, kidnapped, beaten, and forced to withdraw money out of ATMs. His attackers then tied him up, poured gasoline on his SUV, and set it on fire. Luckily, Dixon survived after being pulled to safety, and multiple suspects were arrested, including his own nephew, turning the case into a chilling example of how kindness can turn someone into a target and transform a good deed into a near-fatal outcome. Here's a video of a cannon being fired to trigger an avalanche, a controlled safety procedure used in mountainous regions to reduce the risk of dangerous, unpredictable slides. By firing explosives or specialized avalanche cannons into unstable snowpack, crews can release smaller avalanches on their own terms before pressure builds into something large enough to threaten roads, ski resorts, or local communities. The goal isn't to create destruction, but to stabilize slopes by releasing weak layers of snow that could otherwise collapse later under the weight of new snowfall or passing skiers. Timing, weather data, and snowpack analysis all play a role in deciding when a controlled release is necessary. I don't know what to say. This girl was filming herself when she accidentally captured an unbelievable meteorite breaking apart in the skies above Portugal. This guy who lives in Alaska saw that video and said, "Hold my beer." The aurora borealis forms when charged particles from the sun interact with the Earth's magnetic field and gases in the upper atmosphere. Oxygen typically produces green or red light, while nitrogen can appear blue or purple. These reactions happen about 60 to 200 miles above the surface, which is why the lights look like they're moving across the entire night sky. Scientists have captured the oldest living vertebrate on Earth drifting through near black Arctic waters, a Greenland shark moving slowly through the depths. Clear footage of these sharks is extremely uncommon because they live so deep and in low light. Scientists believe some can live for centuries, with eye lens analysis suggesting lifespans up to 400 years and possibly even closer to 500. They only grow about a centimeter per year, yet can still reach lengths over 20 feet, and females may not reach sexual maturity until around 150 years old, one of the slowest life cycles ever recorded. Many carry parasites that eventually damage their vision, yet they still hunt using scent and vibration. If the highest estimates are correct, this animal could have been alive since the 1500s, moving through the ocean long before the Pilgrims sailed to America. Here's some footage from an actual other world, captured by a robotic rover crawling across the surface of Mars, nearly 225 million miles from Earth. What you're seeing isn't a traditional video recording. It's a splicing of thousands of individual photos stitched together into a moving panorama, since rovers don't record footage the way cameras on Earth do. Every frame has to survive extreme cold, radiation, and dust before being sent back as radio signals traveling through space. You're looking at terrain no human has ever touched, ancient rock formations and dry landscapes that may have once held water, captured piece by a machine made by humans exploring a silent planet. Here's some insanely rare footage of a siphonophore, a deep-sea colony that looks more like an alien or sea creature than anything from Earth. Even though they appear to be a single creature, they're actually colonies made up of thousands of tiny bodies called zooids, each assigned a specific role like feeding, reproduction, or movement. Some species can grow longer than a blue whale, trailing glowing tentacles through the dark to sting and capture prey. Because they're extremely delicate and live thousands of feet below the surface, clear footage of siphonophores in their natural environment is rarely captured. Here's some footage of the only volcano in the world famous for its blue lava, Indonesia's Kawah Ijen. What you're seeing isn't actually blue molten rock, but sulfuric gas is igniting as they escape the crater, creating electric blue flames that can flow down the slope like liquid fire at night. The effect is only visible in darkness, which is why most clips are filmed after sunset. Miners still descend into the crater through toxic fumes to collect sulfur, working inside one of the most extreme volcanic environments on Earth. Just last week, a college party clip blew up online after looks-maxing streamer Clavicular got brutally frame-mogged by an ASU frat lord standing beside him with zero effort, the camera angle draining his aura in real time. The posture diff locked him into a ruthless side-by-side that spread across feeds like wildfire. The moment triggered instant cortisol spikes and total aura collapse, while the frat leader named Varys leaned into the attention, jester maxing across campus and dropping the nonchalant gimmick that made the clip go viral. Themes across the internet quickly flooded the timeline, going full goon max over every micro-expression like it was a historical artifact, reposting the same frozen frame until it became the only canon version people recognized. Edits kept looping, glaze levels stayed high, and the posture diff turned into permanent lore. What should have been a forgettable party interaction became a snapshot the algorithm refused to let die, slowly reshaping Clavicular's image into a meme defined by one cursed angle. NHL star Johnny Gaudreau, known as Johnny Hockey, built a reputation as one of the league's most electric undersized scorers, dazzling fans with elite speed despite standing just 5'9". But in August of 2024, he returned to his New Jersey hometown with his younger brother Matthew for their sister's wedding weekend, a trip meant to be a celebration. While riding bicycles together along a rural road at night, police say a drunk driver attempted to pass traffic and slammed into both brothers from behind, killing them at the young ages of 31 and 29. Prosecutors later charged the driver with aggravated manslaughter, reckless vehicular homicide, evidence tampering, and leaving the scene, with the case still moving through courts as the hockey world mourned one of its brightest stars. But just today, after Team USA defeated Canada in overtime to secure Olympic gold, players carried Gaudreau's number 13 jersey onto the ice and brought his children into the celebration, dedicating the victory to him in an emotional tribute that showed how deeply his loss still resonates across the sport. You may have this extremely rare eye condition without even realizing it. Visual snow is a neurological condition where a constant layer of flickering static fills a person's entire field of vision, often described like television noise that never turns off. For years, it was thought to be extremely rare, partly because many sufferers never reported it, believing their vision was normal. Only recently has it been more widely recognized as visual snow syndrome, with researchers linking it to abnormal activity in the brain's visual processing areas rather than problems with the eyeballs themselves. There's currently no known cure, though some treatments may help reduce symptoms for certain patients. Some people live with the condition for decades before realizing that what they see is not how most people experience the world. Xenoturbella is a simple deep-sea organism that has no brain, no eyes, and no clearly defined organ, consisting mostly of a soft, ciliated body with a single opening used for both feeding and waste. First discovered in the 1900s, it puzzled scientists for decades because its anatomy is so minimal that researchers struggled to classify it, with debates still continuing over where it fits on the evolutionary tree. It survives by ingesting tiny organic material on the ocean floor, and for many researchers it appears to exist for no clear reason. Takeru Kobayashi, the competitive eater who helped popularize modern eating contests, said he stepped away from competition after years of extreme training left him disconnected from normal hunger. In recent interviews, he's explained that he rarely feels hunger and sometimes even forgets to eat, saying he envies people whose bodies still send basic appetite signals. Kobayashi suggested that constantly forcing himself beyond fullness may have dulled the body's natural warning system, with doctors noting that long-term competitive eating can distort hunger cues and place lasting stress on the body's digestive system. In December of 1984, 12-year-old Janelle Matthews disappeared from her home in Greeley, Colorado, after returning from a school concert, leaving behind signs that she'd been taken from the house. For decades, the case went unsolved until construction workers discovered her remains in 2019, 15 miles away from where she disappeared. Investigators soon focused on former neighbor Stephen Pankey, who'd repeatedly inserted himself into public discussions about the case and referenced it several times while running for governor of Idaho. Prosecutors said his own statements and changing stories helped tie him to the crime. In 2022, Pankey was convicted of kidnapping and murder and later sentenced to life in prison. This may be the most disturbing Valentine's Day gift of all time. South African trophy hunter Marilies van der Merwe drew backlash after killing a 17-year-old bull giraffe during a Valentine's Day hunt her husband reportedly paid for. After shooting the animal, she cut out its heart and presented it to her husband as a Valentine's Day gift, later posting photos with it online. The images quickly went viral and sparked criticism worldwide, but she defended the hunt by saying regulated trophy hunts generate permit fees that go toward wildlife management, anti-poaching efforts, and local land conservation, and that older, non-breeding animals are often selected to reduce pressure on habitats. In 2020, a Dollar General employee with diabetes was fired after drinking a $2 orange juice at the register when she began feeling symptoms of diabetic shock. The company said she violated policy by consuming merchandise before paying for it, labeling the act as grazing, even though she later paid for the drink. The dispute escalated into a lawsuit, and a jury ultimately awarded her $277,000 in damages, turning the incident into a widely discussed example of strict workplace policy clashing with a medical emergency.